Let me tell you something. If some of these folks were around when Columbus set sail, they must have been founding members of the Flat Earth Society. They would not have believed that the world was round.
Day after day, alone on a hill, the man with the foolish grin is keeping perfectly still, but nobody wants to know him. You can see that he's just a fool, and he never gives an answer. But the fool on the hill sees the sun going down, and the eyes in his head see the world spinning around. All my life I have waited to be given any word. It was screaming to be heard. The earth can be any shape you want it, any shape at all. Bright and cold or dark and warm, long or thin or small, but it's home. And all I ever had, maybe why for me the earth is flat. I'm on a plane, I can't complain. I'm on a plane. Somewhere I have heard this before. In a dream my memory stored. Air's defense and neutered and stayed. What the hell am I trying to say? It's not time to make it unclear, to write out lines that don't make sense. Love myself better than you. I know it's wrong, so what should I do? And one more special message to go, and then I'm done, and I can go home. Love myself better than you. I know it's wrong, so what should I do? I'm on a plane, I can't complain. I'm on a plane, I can't complain. I'm on a plane.
We were cut off from the rest of the world by a mysterious dome. Invisible, indestructible, and completely inescapable.
Day 93 under the dome. What started as impolite behavior has devolved into a homicidal free-for-all, once seen only in inexpensive NASCAR.
Let's ransack a government building!
On Operation Fishbowl, nuclear detonations rent the sky 5 times.
And if the sun is angled the right way, only when you're outdoors, you will get a rainbow. So that's the first question. Why can you not simulate a rainbow indoors? There's a stipulation. You can create a rainbow indoors, but you need a mirror. You need a mirror to do a science test and create a rainbow inside. So I beg the question, if you need a mirror indoors, what's providing the mirror when you are outdoors? there is a mirror when you are outside to create the rainbow. And that mirror is the dome. It's catching sunlight and it's meeting itself to create all the various colors. It collides in the water droplet, serves as a lens, and the slight variations of angle creates the colors of the rainbow. A rainbow proves that there's a dome above your head.
That's why I was going to offer a hand. Yeah, because...
layers of our air, or atmosphere, whatever you want to call it. Down here on Earth, where we would be, is the troposphere, the tropo layer, then the strato layer, meso layer, and then the thermo layer. And as you can see, thermo is cold, so I call that the ice area, and fire is hot, so that's where the fire would be. But you know, you would think at first that the moon would be in the meso layer, and that's what I thought. But I think they're both up here, and that's based on a video I just watched again, actually, from an amateur rocket launch, a Go Fast rocket that was launched in 2014. When you watch that video, the rocket takes off. Camera's pointing down. For some reason, cameras are always pointing down and never up, which would be nice if you could see what's going on when they're going up. But anyway. Camera's pointing down, rocket takes off, and pretty quickly the rocket starts spinning around like crazy. I mean, you can see the fins and you can see the ground spinning. It might make you dizzy if you stare at it too long. So the rocket's spinning as it's traveling up, and about 1 minute into the flight, it suddenly just stops. Rocket just stops, and that spinning stops. Everything just stops, and it just kind of sits there for a second.
Yeah, copy. We are not getting telemetry from that last song. Please stand by. Some people have suggested that it hit a dome that may be above us, but
I thought at that velocity it would have been destroyed. So I didn't think much of it when I originally watched it, but I have to thank a guy named Jeff who just sent it to me again, because it really put some pieces together for what I was working on with this. And when you watch the video, the rocket just stops. And so I started looking up the stats. That rocket went over 3,500 miles per hour on that trip. Now, it might not have been going that fast when it stopped, but it was going a few thousand miles per hour at least, and it just, all that energy just suddenly, where did it go? Rockets don't have brakes. It literally stops, and I mean the rotation keeps going a little bit, but all of that angular momentum from the rotation of the rocket and the linear momentum from flying up just stopped? No, it had to have hit something. But what did it hit? If it hit a solid surface, the rocket would have been destroyed, and most likely the camera too, so we wouldn't have the footage, and obviously that's not the case. So when you start watching it, around that time, around a minute in, a few seconds later, those two stages separate. It's a two-stage rocket, it looks like, and you watch the bottom half of the rocket start to fall down, as you would expect. But then the upper half, the way the camera's mounted to it, starts spinning around, and very slowly it starts to fall back towards Earth. Very slowly. And you might think, well, I have it up here, the Go Fast rocket got up to about 117 kilometers. And outer space is considered in the thermo layer. Once you cross into the thermo layers, technically you're in outer space. But what doesn't make sense is, just because you fly vertically into outer space doesn't mean that you're just going to float there. That's not how it works, based on the heliocentric model. If you watch Balls Out Physics Episode 3, I talked about how you have to have an orbital velocity, and these orbital velocities are incredibly fast. You have to be orbiting the Earth to resist the force pulling down on you, gravity, weight, whatever you want to call it, that pulls down on you. You have to do that. You have to do, basically, this string is gravity. Just to show this again, if you haven't seen that, you have to be moving at a high velocity to resist that force. That rocket went straight up, so it should have fallen straight back down. Now, just to see what the acceleration on that rocket should be, assuming very thin, almost no air up here, because that's what's supposed to be there, I did a calculation at 117 kilometers plus the radius of the Earth, and I found that the acceleration towards Earth, due to gravity, if you want to call it that, or due to weight, should be roughly 9.46 meters per second squared. That's not much. That rate is pretty close to the rate at sea level, which is 9.81 meters per second squared. So it should have basically done this, but it didn't. It stops, and then it just kind of slowly starts sinking, like it's in water or some type of liquid. That's what it looks like. If you really start watching it, the way those pieces are falling, if you get to about 2 minutes and 10 seconds in, you see the other stage, the lower half of the rocket, still slowly tumbling down like it's in water. According to mainstream science, as you get up in these layers, as the temperature goes up, as you get up in these layers, the pressure decreases. The pressure becomes almost nothing in the thermo layer and meso layer as well. But suddenly, it just kind of stops and then slowly starts sinking. What's going on here? Is there water there? There's some kind of liquid? Or some kind of very, very dense gas? Scriptures tell us that there is water up there.
Over half a mile down, at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, they came across what appeared to be an underwater lake, over 20 meters long, with its own sandy shore. Around its edge, there even seemed to be a tide line. But this couldn't be, of course. This was underwater. In fact, the lapping edge was created by a thick soup of salty brine, far heavier than the surrounding seawater, and the sand was made up of hundreds of thousands of mussels. Once again, in the midst of a totally barren seabed, an extraordinarily rich oasis of life, totally independent of the sun's energy. The source of energy this time was not sulfides, but methane bubbling out of the seabed. And once again, the mussels carried special bacteria capable of fixing the methane's energy. Just like the hot vents, a complete ecosystem had developed based on the bacteria. There was an enormous variety of completely new species. Shrimps, weird squat lobsters, and bright red polychaete worms. These oases were called cold seeps and were surprisingly similar to the hot vents. The geological processes in the sea floor that produce methane also tend to result in the release of hydrogen sulfides. It was hardly surprising then when, not far from the brine pool, they found tube worms. Extensive fields of tube worms.
One of the strangest places on the ocean's floor was only just discovered in the 1990s. I might degree as one of a handful of people to ever see it in person.
Without a doubt, one of the most amazing things that I have ever seen in the bottom of the ocean. It was while filming for Blue Planet. It was in the Gulf of Mexico. I noticed there's something out in the distance. Couldn't tell exactly what, but it looked like a dark band. And as we approached it, the dark band became a donut. I saw this donut that was black in the center. What the heck is that? And so, as we get closer and closer to it, I noticed that the black band had what appeared to be kind of steam over it. And then I looked, and there was water lapping against the shoreline. This band was a ring of mussels. And inside the ring of mussels was a lake. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm already underwater. We went out over the water in this lake and tried to descend in it and bounced off. It was so super saline and dense that the submarine couldn't go down in it. We literally bounced off, and as we bounced off, we sent ripples heading back to the shoreline. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it.
But Eric, have you seen these submarines that are going down to very, very deep areas of the Black Sea, and they're finding remarkable rivers with trees, leaves, waterfalls, rivers under the ocean? Have you seen those?
I've seen, who was that guy? There was one deep sea explorer that was talking about how he went down to the depths, I think it was the Mariana Trench, or one of the deepest places in the ocean, and saw what looked like a lake. And there was like steam rising over it, and like you said, little greenery and stuff around it. And so he thought, oh, let's go down into that underwater lake or whatever it is. And as he goes to go into it, he bounced off of it and said it was so saline, the water was, that you couldn't penetrate it, as though there's like a whole nother level of super saline water under the oceans, under the level, the sea level that we have. And the Bible and other things actually talk about something like this. There being separating the waters from the waters is one of the first things the Bible said that God did. What does that mean? Separate the waters from the waters. But it's interesting when you see something like this, and it's literally like a level of one kind of water separated but connected to the oceans, the other level of water.
And the reason why I ask you is this is more of a speculative question, but I've seen the footage of these amateur rockets that go all the way up. All of a sudden, it's not that they explode or crash into something, but it's almost as if they bounce off something. What possibly could the sky firmament be made of, and are those really stars above us?
Anything that we sent up, like balloons or rockets, it reaches a point that it can't go any further and starts coming back down. What goes up must come down. The old adage very much is true, but doesn't make any sense on the spinning ball Earth, because there is no up and down on a spinning ball Earth. It's just gravity pulling things toward a central position, and the idea of up and down are just some foolish notion that you think. So when things actually go up, again, you're able to rise up because of relative density. So what happens is you use a helium balloon or whatever it is, or a propulsion system. But then once you get to a layer of atmosphere that gets lighter and lighter, the balloon will pop as it equalizes, or the propulsion system won't be able to have anything to push off of, so it starts to arc downwards and will eventually make a parabolic curve and come back down to Earth, which is even what the official happens to the official rockets, the official sources. You'll notice they don't go straight up either. They make a parabolic curve and eventually come right back down to Earth. They say that they're going around the curvature of the ball Earth, and that's the reason why you always see that parabolic curve that every single rocket makes. But what they're really doing is just shooting a rocket into the ocean and then giving you CGI images and studio footage from the supposed moon or Mars, or when they're in outer space, they are in a dark pool. They do their outer space ISS footage in pools, and that's why you'll often see bubbles in space. They've been caught over and over and over again, right up, even images just a couple weeks ago, bubbles in space. Air bubbles, because they're not in space. They're in a dark pool of water with projected LCD screens showing a fake ball Earth underneath them. And when they're in their supposed ISS, they're just floating around either on zero-G planes, which is a type of just a regular plane doing a type of maneuver that allows for weightlessness, which you can then cut and paste scenes of to make it seem like you're weightless ad infinitum. And people ask me this a lot. Well, if that's the case, then you can only maintain weightlessness for short periods of time, yet they have supposedly uninterrupted shots going for minutes showing people floating. Firstly, they do most of those with green screens and wires, so they're not in zero-G planes for most of the long footage. And for some of the footage that is longer and free-floating, you'll notice that they have spliced it. There's people have shown made videos debunking these things. You'll see that the people will fade out and then fade back in if you slow it down to the very last frames of each little section that they're doing, they are splicing these things to make it look like longer footage, and they're floating in their planes, making it look like they're in outer space. This is one of their illusions that they've achieved to really make people think that their infinite space cosmology is a reality.
Speaking of the illusion, look at Hollywood, the movie Gravity. I think I mentioned this to you the last time we spoke, but Alfonso Cuarón, the director of that movie, was in a press conference, and a reporter all of a sudden said, "So, Mr. Cuarón, how were you able to accomplish this? You know, how many months did you stay up there in space filming the movie? And Cuarón kind of bit his tongue thinking, this guy is serious. And he actually said, well, we want to thank the Russians because they allowed us to stay there for 1 month, and we want to thank this and the Europeans. And the reporter just believed it. So imagine how many people believe Hollywood. So if they believe Hollywood, they must believe NASA.
That's right. I mean, look how convincing Hollywood does it with movies like Gravity. If Hollywood can convince you that well in a studio that they're out in outer space, then why can't NASA have been doing the same thing for the past 50 years?
With billions of dollars. Not millions, but billions.
Right down a sinkhole. Yeah, CGI sinkhole. And yeah, so what, like I was saying, that they get us to believe that they're out there in space floating around by doing these camera tricks and effects. But in your own experience, if you've gone skydiving, you don't float. No matter how high you go up, you come right back down to the Earth. You take, like I said, the rockets, parabolic curve, come back down. A plane, you try to go up at as much of an arc as you can. Eventually, you're going to get to a point before about 100,000 feet that you just can't anymore, and you're going to come right back down. How come these people claim that they can, and then they just start floating? Where's this magic floaty point in the atmosphere? They can't tell you this either, that no matter how high you get, you come right back down, right down to the Earth. But there's some point where, past this point, 1 inch past whatever this magic point is, now you just float infinitely. And that's what they say they're doing.
Or what about this Van Allen belt? 2 layers. The inner layer, which is 600 miles, so we're told, and the outer layer, 3,700 miles of radiation. So in order for us to go to the moon, we have to go and come back. Now, I don't know how old you are, but I remember when I was younger, I would go to the airport and I had my non-digital camera, and at the airport they would tell, don't send it through the X-ray because it's going to be fried. You'll lose your photographs. If that's what they're telling me here on Earth, those people who took those Hasselblad cameras up there, wouldn't they get fried? Not to mention their own bodies because their suits were not built with gold layers.
Right. Yeah, they can't keep up with their own nonsense. So they tell us that they've been hundreds and hundreds of miles out there and that there's radiation, but then they forget that the type of radiation that they've told us about is so bad that they would die and all of their camera footage would be gone if it actually existed. So then when you call them on that, then the astronauts and awe their way through it and say, well, I heard that there was radiation, but we didn't really experience anything, except when you close your eyes, we see little specks of light, and those are actually radiation specks.
Or Alan Bean, who said, we hadn't discovered it then. So that makes it...
that was hilarious.
Yeah, incredible. Now, last question of Flat Earth before you give me 5 minutes of the dinosaur hoax. I thought the show was going to be a lot of dinosaurs, but I'm so glad that we did a Flat Earth part 2 because we need it. What will all the academic astronomers, the astronomers, NASA employees, climatologists, cartographers, astronauts, and supporting government employees do for work when a globe Earth is exposed as a hoax?
Right. All their cushy Freemason-given jobs are going to be taken away because they haven't done a good enough job at them. When you become a Freemason, you rise in the degrees. You're put into, if you're not already in positions of power and then brought into Freemasonry, you're brought into Freemasonry and then put into positions of power. And so when these people fail at their propaganda positions and the truth comes out, they're going to be out of a job. So that's what's going to happen. And not only will they be out of a job, but they'll be out of credibility. And that's not just NASA and every other space agency, but every government institution, university, everywhere that's been teaching this nonsense now has to totally restructure and rethink where they're getting their information. And society itself has to restructure and rethink about, am I going to spend all this money just to be brainwashed? Am I going to send my kids to these public schools that are teaching them this nonsense? Am I going to vote for the politicians and people that are upholding this? Am I going to work for the militaries that are supposedly getting ready to deal with the off-world alien invasion? They're now mixing military propaganda with science fiction. They've got commercials on U.S. TV for the U.S. Army acting like they're going to fight aliens.
That's right.
Claiming, yeah, it's the weirdest stuff. So I mean, they're really pushing into this science fiction worldview that they've been indoctrinating us into. I think we're close to the next step.
I think so. Absolutely.
And the next step will be the disclosure, whatever you call it, of aliens, and they're going to unleash, be it a holographic or technological or genetic hybridization type thing, something that is going to make the populace believe these aliens are real and that we need to unite to either welcome or fight them. And that's going to be the next step in this huge indoctrination. And man, once we're there, just think how difficult it's going to be to get people out of this.
I've said that
the Pope a little bit ago and gave him his book. Now the book is called Reset. Jesus Changes Everything. The logo on the cover loosely resembles the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, and the symbol of death and rebirth and the cyclical aeons of the cosmos according to all the hidden mysteries. But according to other researchers of the ancients, there's a major connection between the Ouroboros and the Milky Way galaxy, and that connects largely to the biblical mention of Leviathan, the sea serpent monster thing. So, in other words, the cover on Nick Hall's book here could very well be representing the sea serpent Leviathan, which is called the dragon that is in the sea, which, by the way, God eventually slays. And could there be a connection here to the beast that rises out of the sea in Bible prophecy in Revelation 13? Wow, if you're tracking with me there, it's a little bit intense, because now we're talking about literally the Protestant church, if you will, reconnect back into Catholicism, reconnecting back into all the world religions, becoming this one world religious system again. And that is the beast that may rise out of the sea. And, you know, the logic there is that the sea is mentioned later in the book of Revelation as the waters, and the waters represents the peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So again, this unity, this one worldness, the celebration around that concept takes us right back to the days of the Tower of Babel, which happened to be the days of Noah, because Noah was alive, most likely.
Well, I was working on another project altogether, and then this morning I came across this video by Guns and just had to do something on it real quick. One thing that never ceases to amaze me is how many times I watch a Face Like the Sun video and hear him talking about something that just yet again jumps out at me as some other crazy avenue to explore from the enclosed flat Earth cosmology angle. And here's another one. As he mentions all the ancient esoteric connections between the serpent and the Milky Way, and of course how this connects to Leviathan and biblical prophecy, and the great serpent being, of course, Satan. And, you know, I definitely would also recommend D13's series of videos on Leviathan, and he connects it to a lot of the black sun symbolism and mythologies, and there's so many things that just interconnect, and there's so much overlap to it all. But again, stepping back and just, you know, asking a very, very basic question of this whole idea of the Milky Way. You know, which makes more sense if we're talking about in terms of the beast from the sea? Are we talking about he's just in the oceans on the globe, or does it make a lot more sense if we're talking about perhaps it is the oceans as well, but is the sea being, you know, perhaps it does allude to the oceans in the sense that it's all in a way connected to, you know, the seas or the oceans that are within the enclosure, connecting to the quote-unquote cosmic sea that is once again somehow connected to the spiritual realm, or part of it, or however exactly that works. I don't have it all, I don't even pretend to understand how it all works. I'm just saying it makes so much more sense once again from this cosmology. But speaking of flat Earth cosmology and the Ouroboros and one world religion and prophecy and all that. I just wanted to include a little excerpt from a video by one of my favorite creators. His name is C.A. Silva. If you haven't seen any of his videos or been to his channel yet, I definitely encourage everyone to go and subscribe to him. Has a lot of really interesting information. He is exploring the flat earth as well, from a biblical point of view, but also not just focusing on that primarily. So he just covers a wide range of very pertinent topics and very much understands the ramifications of what's happening today. And so he too, like Gons, actually before Gons came out with this video several days ago, was talking about the same event, this Together 2016 event with the Pope and the ecumenical, just the whole ecumenical bent that it has. And he too independently noticed that this symbol was reminiscent of the snake eating its tail, the Ouroboros. So I think a lot of people are kind of keying in on that, but it's interesting to connect all these dots here. And then in his video as well, he mentioned David Wilkerson's vision, which was back in, I believe, 1973 or somewhere in that. If you know who David Wilkerson is, I actually made a video, like I think over a year ago, about as an excerpt from that speech, and it really is amazing how we are seeing what he was talking about and what the Bible, of course, ultimately prophesies unfold. So here are those two clips as well.
I myself also feel that there is something just not right about this particular conference. Now, I don't do this video to, to mock anyone. If you're going to this conference, then, my prayers are with you. I do not try to say that you're some horrible, evil kind of person because you're going to this conference, or even the, the artists or the speakers that are going to this thing. But to me, again, as you look at just what they're portraying here, everything looks all well and good, but it's very appealing. It's a lot of eye candy, a lot of people, jumping and shouting and having a great time. And, to me, again, this screams of the worldly church that is rising up, and, as opposed to the true spiritual and visible church, something that David Wilkerson prophesied many years ago, that there'd be two big churches that would rise up in the last days. One would be very visible, very out in the open, that would seemingly be about Jesus, but they really, have nothing to do with Jesus. They're very apostate, they're very worldly. And then there would be, and also it would be in partnership with the Roman Catholic Church. But the other church would be invisible. It would be truly full of the Spirit. That church would be able to see the signs of the times. That church would be focused on the return of Christ. And so I believe those two churches are definitely rising. And this particular conference seems to scream to me ecumenicalism, one world kind of religion kind of stuff happening. When you look at these things, even the logo, as we'll talk about, this whole theme of togetherness, of unity, seems to scream new age, new world order, globalism, all that kind of stuff. Even as we look at, some of the speakers and the artists that are going to be at this particular conference. Now, again, I'm not trying to knock anyone that's going there or any of the speakers or whatever, but the fact that Hillsong United is, one of the top performers at this, particular conference already, makes red flags go off to me. We've already spoken, in a previous video about the Naked Cowboy and all the antics that Hillsong is known for, whether it's about homosexuals being in their worship team, or, maybe they're not on the leadership team anymore, but Brian Houston clearly knew about it, or about the fact that, even in their Christmas services, they had, half-naked girls running around, all this kind of stuff. So, then of course the latest antics with the Naked Cowboy, then of course the UK pastor dressing up as Austin Powers. So already this kind of screams to me that, something is just not right about this. The fact that Hillsong and many of these people are also in line with the Pope. Many of these mega church leaders and pastors are all lined up with the Pope, whether it's Rick Warren, whether it's Joel Osteen, whether it's T.D. Jakes, Joyce Meyer, Creflo Dollar, Brian Houston. They're all in league with this Pope Francis. So that also screams to me, one world, ecumenicalism, all that kind of stuff. And, so, the founder of this is Nick Hall of Pulse. He has founded this ministry called Pulse, and he's written a book called Reset. And, just to dig into that movement first, Reset already, when you look at the logo of this book, already it's got the same thing that's circled, that's not fully ended. This reminds me of this particular, Illuminati symbolism, the fire, in the circle of fire, the ring of fire, which represents the snake, eating the tail, which basically represents, Lucifer's, eternal kingdom. You see this in so many different company logos that are all tied to the Illuminati. So right away already, this is kind of screaming to me of, Illuminati, one world order kind of stuff, with this logo here.
Now let me share with you what the Holy Spirit's revealed to me in vision concerning this persecution. Number one, it's going to come as a persecution madness on the earth. I see now persecution coming such as mankind has never before witnessed. This will be a persecution of true Jesus believers, and it's going to rise like a many-headed monster out of the sea. It'll start slowly, subtly, coming at a time when religious freedom appears to be at a peak. But it's going to spread the United States, Canada, the entire world, and finally become a kind of madness. That madness is already upon us. The Antichrist spirit is entering the hearts of certain men in high places already. Government, in the judicial system, and it's led to a spiritual wickedness in high places. And this spiritual wickedness in high places will eventually and soon lead to an harassment not only of officials, but those in churches, missionaries, and ministers. There's already evidence of this harassment. I see a time coming when nearly all evangelical missionary projects, all religious radio and television programming, all incorporated missionary societies are going to be so closely monitored, questioned, and badgered by government agencies, they'll be cautious and worried about moving or expanding in any direction. Number two, I see rising a super world church. I see the formation of a super world church council consisting of a union between liberal ecumenical Protestants and the Roman Catholic Church, joining politically hand in hand to create one of the most powerful religious forces on earth. And this union is going to start as a cooperative charities program, and it will end in a political union. This visible super world church is going to be spiritual in name only, freely using the name of Jesus Christ, but will in fact be anti-Christ and political in many of its activities. I see homosexuals and lesbians welcome to the super church union. I see this super world church in the guise of understanding, accepting homosexuals and lesbians into its fellowship. Homosexual and lesbian love will be vindicated by the leadership of this church union. Homosexuals will not only be welcomed, but they'll be encouraged to continue in their practices. Homosexual and lesbian ministers will not only be ordained and given places of authority, they'll be heralded as a new breed of pioneer evangelists introducing new concepts of love and evangelism. I believe this super world church will condone certain occult practices. They'll set up study committees to defang the devil and remake his image into one of a non-entity, bland, someone not to be feared. Now, in some of the most respected, wealthy churches in America, seances will replace prayer meetings, and that's already happening. Now, listen closely. Next, I see the rise of another super church, a supernatural, invisible church, a union of deeply spiritual followers of Jesus Christ, bound together through the Holy Spirit and mutual confidence in Christ and His Word. This supernatural church of true believers will become a kind of underground church and will include Catholics and Protestants of all denominations, young and old, black and white, and people of all nations. And while this visible super world church gains political power, this invisible body of believers will grow tremendously in spiritual power. This power will come from persecution. The persecution madness that's coming upon this earth will drive these Christians closer together and closer to Jesus Christ. There will be less concern about denominational ties and more concern and emphasis on the coming of Jesus Christ. The Holy Spirit will bring together in one all people of all faiths and walks of life. And although this supernatural church already exists around the world, in the days coming soon, it will become politically almost invisible. It will not speak out much on social issues, but as persecution becomes more intense, this body of true believers will become almost radical in its evangelistic efforts, and in this invisible church will receive supernatural unction and Holy Ghost power to preach the gospel to the four corners of the earth.
What does this mean for astrology, Eric? Does a flat earth invalidate thousands of years of teachings?
Quite the opposite. The spinning ball earth is what mostly invalidated astrology, and they changed the term to astronomy once they started lying to us. Astrology says that the movements of the stars and wandering stars, planets around us, has an effect on the life and consciousness of things here, which makes sense in a geocentric perspective where everything revolves around and is beholden to us. In the spinning globe Earth infinite cosmology, astrology makes no sense because these things are just spinning balls of dust that happened for no reason, and we're humans that evolved for no reason. And so how could there possibly be some sort of significance between us and them based on consciousness? Consciousness, something that supposedly evolved into existence out of just material interactions. So it's actually their cosmology that makes astrology irrelevant, and the geocentric flat earth cosmology that people believed for thousands of years, back when astrology was being espoused and the stories were being created and everything, they were basing it on a flat geocentric model where all the stars are revolving around us. So if anything, the flat earth brings astrology back into significance and shows that the earth is important and all the celestial bodies are rotating over us, which attests to our importance. It shows that this is the stage. Like Shakespeare said, the world is a stage. Everything here is been put here and created here for us, and we are the actors. We're, if you think of it as God being the ultimate consciousness, the omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient one that pre-exists all space, time, and matter, creating this yin-yang world of duality and illusion where we're separated from our innate oneness, separated from God, and put into these dualistic bodies of male and female under a sun and moon sky in a world of good and evil where we have to use our subjective consciousness to choose whether we want to rise to the heights of good or the depths of evil. And that's what we're living in here. We're all subjective aspects of this one consciousness that created us here to play and experience on this world stage that's been put here for us. And the ones who are in control of it now are in the business of making you not believe that, making you think, as Mel said earlier, that you're just an insignificant speck and that there's no purpose to your life, so that you should be nothing but a slave and a consumer, and that society should be structured the way it is, geared towards hedonism and selfishness and individuality instead of towards more spiritual aspects. And of course they use religion to control spirituality, to put it into dogmatic boxes, so that they say you must choose one of our religions that we feed you. If you don't believe our atheistic, nihilistic cosmology, the whole spinning ball nonsense, and you still are clinging on to this notion of intelligent design, well, here's Brahma, here's Jesus, here's Muhammad, here's any number of supposed avatars of God that we can get you to believe in, and then box you into this section so that you won't actually use your own mind, your own critical thinking, and evolve that throughout your life, evolve your own spiritual understanding. We want to keep you in this little box, right? If you fall out of the NASA box, we'll catch you in the Islam, Judeo, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever, one of these other boxes to bring you in. So it's, as you said, controlling the opposition. They've got every side covered. So no matter where you go to for truth, they're already controlling that like a gatekeeper, so that you don't get to the reality. So I recommend don't look anywhere really. Just figure it out yourself. No religion has the answer. NASA doesn't have the answer. I don't have the answers. Mel doesn't have the answers. You've got the answers, and it's your responsibility throughout your entire lifetime to not accept some dogmatic explanation or someone else's hearsay, and instead to evolve your own understanding every day as you become smarter and smarter, as you use your own intuition and discernment to figure out the world around you. And that's your religion. That's your worldview. That's your spirituality. Call it what you want, but it's your responsibility to do that. And when you give it up to anyone else, no matter how good intentioned they are, even Jesus or Buddha or whoever it is, that's just their experience. That's not yours. Sure, read them. Sure, learn from them. But to take on someone else's experience or someone else's religion and to say, I am this, I am Muslim, and now suddenly you have to do what all other Muslims do and what is written in this one book. Now suddenly your life has just become a narrow, tiny little box, and all thought and action must come from one book, the Bible or whatever it is. There's millions of great books out there. How can you possibly take one and say, this one, I like this one. I'm going to say that all the answers to all of life's questions, no matter what you ask me, I can find the answer in this little black book. What do you want to know? What do you want to know? And then you open up a section. You say, well, it says right here, Matthew 7:24, some symbolic, metaphorical parable that I can twist to be whatever it is I say I want it to be. And there you go. There's the answer. And then people start living their lives this way. Instead of using their own brain and their own critical thinking, they just start using ancient metaphors and say, look, this proves whatever. The Bible can prove anything you want it to. There's passages of it that say that the animals were created before Adam and Eve, and there's passages that say Adam and Eve were created before the animals. There's passages that completely contradict each other in most books, and that's just the nature of reality. We can't be trusting of someone else's opinions. We have to only trust our own. That's what I'm getting at here.